like every good story, as my friend says, it all begins with your dog has a brain. So we've talked about this in other videos, but within your dog's brain are these building blocks, and these building blocks are characteristics or concepts, whatever you would like to call them, or just building blocks that represent different types of strengths and weaknesses that your dog may have. One dog may have a lot of optimism while another one doesn't. We have dogs who are really great at focus and then other dogs who are not. Flexibility. This is not a complete list of those characteristics, but just kind of representative of what we're talking about. So, again, as I said in another video, what happens is our dogs are out in this world and they get input, and they get that input in lots of different ways, through scent, through vision, hearing. And so they get this input, and automatically those building blocks go into effect as they perceive what's going on around them. And they ask themselves certain questions like, is what I'm seeing important? And they will answer that question yes or no. And then they will go on to say, is it good or bad? And then from that, they will have choose a behavior. And so we really have to do some training to help with that. So, one thing that kind of affects that is the bucket. So, all dogs have a bucket. Some dogs that are big dogs have small buckets, and some dogs that are small dogs have big buckets. The size of the dog doesn't matter. What matters is that all things that happen to your dog pay into that bucket. So think of it as water dumping into the bucket. If it's good or bad, that happens. And once that bucket gets full, it really can affect the types of behaviors that they choose, because then they're just trying to cope. So this is what it would kind of look like. You have an event that happens. So that input is going into your dog. Your dog has a perception. And again, that perception can be affected by some of those building blocks. So if your dog does not have a lot of optimism, they were probably going to answer that question of, is it important? Yes. And then that second question of, is it good or bad? If they don't have a lot of optimism, then they're probably almost always going to say, no, it's bad. So that's going to affect the behaviors that they choose to kind of help them cope with that situation. And so then they might choose behaviors, and they usually choose behaviors that they have rehearsed, or behaviors that make them feel good, like barking. But it can be just about anything. It can be just peeing, or it could be lunging, it could be biting. It's just going to depend on the dog. And so they're going to choose those behaviors. What we would like to do is maybe interrupt that right at that first question of, is what I'm seeing important? I would really rather have a dog that can stop it right there and say, it's just none of my business, and really have no kind of reaction at all. So, one way we can help with that is doing that bucket and making it bigger, or having a bigger hole in it, so that they cope better. We also don't want to let our dogs rehearse behaviors that we don't want them to have, because your dog will definitely do what he or she has rehearsed. And so if you don't want your dog to bark, then we don't allow them to rehearse barking. So we have to do things to prevent the rehearsal of those behaviors. And so what we can do is kind of figure out, well, how is my dog choosing those things? Well, first of all, dogs will always choose things that don't cause them pain. They try to avoid pain at all costs. They only want things that will bring them pleasure. So definitely, they are not going to choose something that is going to hurt them. And this is kind of where some of that using aversives comes in, because yeah, they're not going to bark if they have a shock collar on, because they are going to choose something that doesn't cause them pain. But that's not necessarily stopping that behavior. My mom had a dog, and I will just tell you now that I used to be an aversives trainer. I've tried it all. And none of it was ever effective as games-based training. But he would put on, we had him, he was a barker, and we put a collar on him and a bark collar on him, and he would just bark until he could not tolerate that pain any longer. So he loved the barking so much, and he rehearsed the barking so much that he would still do it, but only to the certain point where he could avoid the real pain. So that pleasure and pain was just like this constant struggle in his mind. The barking gave him pleasure, so he was going to do it, but only until he couldn't stand the pain any longer. He never really learned how to not bark using the bark collar. Um, so that's how dogs choose. And they're going to do, again, what they rehearse. So let me ask you a question. If you're looking at these two pictures, look at that bottom picture. That's a room, and that room is dark. Let's say that it really, really smells bad. And it's cold or hot, whichever you would be more uncomfortable in. If you don't like hot, then it's really hot or it's really cold. You can't really see anything in there, and as you're in there, you're really hungry. You can't really do anything because you can't see. And then we have this other room up at the top that's at a really nice hotel. You have these huge windows that let in sunlight, and you have a great view out the window. It's either, like a lake or the ocean or the mountains, whatever you want. You can keep the temperature just where you want it. You have people that are doing everything for you. You don't have to do any cleaning, cooking, and your favorite foods are right there at your fingertips. You can do anything you want there. Now, which one would you choose? Well, obviously, you would choose the one that brings you more pleasure. Our dogs are the same way. They're going to choose the thing that gives them more value. So we have to provide that value to them as we're teaching them these concepts. Sometimes that looks like food reinforcement. Sometimes that might be play reinforcement. Sometimes that might be verbal praise reinforcement, or a pat on the head, um, if that's something your dog likes. And that's the key. It's got to be something your dog likes. So you got to kind of know your dog, and kind of find out what is it that they're going to get value from. And then we're going to work on these different concepts. It's a very individualized type of training because every dog is different, and every dog needs to work on different characteristics and concepts, to make their struggles, make them be able to handle their struggles. Now, where do they get those characteristics from? Again, I talked about this in another video, but it depends on lots of different things. Of course, they're a dog, and they're going to have characteristics that dogs have. Okay, but a lot of the other things is breed. Breed has a lot to do with it. My border collie doesn't have a whole lot of optimism. Just is not there. But boy, she has a lot of independence, and does very well in with independence. My other dog, Dutch, he does not have any independence at all. He wants to be right by me constantly, 24/7. He hates it when I leave him. So that really affects the kinds of games and stuff I play with him and the things that he struggles with. Gender, age, their past experiences, these are all things that will affect those
Okay, this
characteristics.
is how
So
Dutch
now I'm going to
behaves
show
when
you
I've been
this
away from
video,
him. I've probably only
and
been
this
away
is
for him for less than 5 minutes right
Dutch.
now.
We're going to
Okay?
see him, how he interacts with me when I come in.
My
And
shoe,
I've only
Dutch.
been out for just a few minutes. Okay, if you look at Katie, she's
Your
just
shoe.
hanging back. Dutch, she wants to see me, but Dutch does all kinds of things. He grabs shoes or clothes,
Cute. Drop.
anything he can find. That was a
Go
shoe.
find something to...
Um,
No. It's my shoe.
he's
Dutch.
trying to jump up on me. He'll nip and bite. Okay, so obviously some characteristics he needs to work on, are tolerance of frustration, independence, some disengagement. So, there are a lot of things there that I have to work on calm. So how would I fix this? Well, to fix those frustrations that we have with our dogs or unwanted behaviors, there's lots of things we can do. So we can change their perception of those incoming events. And how we do that is that we work on some of those concepts that would affect that perception, that affect that first question of, is this important? And even that second question of, is this good or bad? So that would be things like confidence, disengagement. Um, I mentioned the optimism. So we would work on those things to kind of, like I said again, to cut off the question chain right at that first question. And instead of saying, is this important? My dog would just say, is this important? Oh, you know what? It's none of my business anyway. We could grow their bucket and maybe get it bigger, or maybe even just get a hole in it or make a bigger hole in it so that they can deal with things just a little bit better. So it takes longer for that bucket to get filled so they don't go on to those unwanted behaviors like snapping, biting, pulling on their leash, lunging, those kinds of things. Maybe we create more desirable tunnels or rooms for them. If I'm standing out with my dog in the field, and so let's go back to my border collie who's very chase driven. If I am standing out in the field and she is 15 feet away from me, and on one side of her there's a squirrel just asking to be chased, and there's on the other side there's me and I am calling for her, she's going to choose the thing that she finds more value in. And so I've got to make myself look a lot more valuable than chasing that squirrel. So we need to create more desirable rooms and tunnels, or tunnels for them to go to. They don't want to go to the dark, dank, yucky room. They want to go to the nice room. Then we're going to manage rehearsal. So don't let your dog do the things that you don't want them to do. So if I want my dog to be calm in the living room, then I'm not going to play games that are really high energy in that area, or I might need to just manage it a little bit. And like bring the kennel into that area so that they can go in their kennel and have some quiet time in their kennel, chewing on a long lasting chew, or bring the bed in there, and practice boundary games in that room. And then lastly, we wanted to develop, and really this is covers the other four, is develop and strengthen concepts. So if they have some calmness, let me grow that a little bit more. And I would say that's the biggest concept that we would want to grow, is that characteristic of calm. But let's grow the ones we need to grow and develop, create the ones that they don't have any of, and grow those things. And this is how we fix that. So, okay, you're saying, okay, that's great, but how do we do that? Well, we do it through games. Like I've said in another video before, games have a lot of positive things going for them that makes it good for training. First of all, the sessions that we do are short. They are not these long drawn out sessions that become tedious and that become something that we have to do. These 3-minute game sessions are something we get to do. They're fun. They're fun for both you and for your dog. And so it's not something that becomes this horrible uh, must do thing. It's fun. It's good. And when we play these games, they are games that have been developed for you to play that strengthen certain concepts. And in playing them, they can build those concepts up. Okay, so let's talk a minute. We had Dutch a few minutes ago in that video. and that frustrating activity and behavior that he was doing, that was just that insane craziness, because he had been away from me and now I came back in, and I'm not kidding, it was just a few minutes. I could step out and come back in and it would be the same behavior. So what is something I could do with him? Well, here's a video of me playing a game with him, called figure eights. So basically we are just walking figure eights. And this behavior, this game, teaches him the concept of calmness. It also teaches him that in my presence, he doesn't have to be crazy, that we can just be together, and we're just doing this kind of rote walking. And it focuses him back on just that calm behavior. It's a non event. Now, normally I would play that game inside first and then take him outside. I chose outside first because that was actually a less distracting environment for him. But what you do normally is you will take the game that you're playing, play it in a familiar area with no distractions, an area that they can feel safe in, that they can feel calmness in. Then you'll take that when they've really developed it there and take it outside and play in an outdoor area with very little distraction. So maybe your backyard, um, or something like that. Once they get it to a really, really good level there, you're going to take them somewhere else and you're going to play it there, but you don't want it to have a ton of really close distractions. Maybe a little bit of distraction, but not a lot. But then they go to this other place and they say, oh, yeah, we played this at home in the house. We played it outside. We're just playing it here. I can do that. No big deal. And you get them at a comfortable level there. And then you continue it on, growing the distraction. And what happens is they take that knowledge and they transfer it to other areas until it becomes second nature for them. And we've actually rewired their brain. Some things to remember when we're playing this: it takes time, obviously. We don't learn something just overnight. So when you went to school, you learned how to do different things at school. You practiced them at home when you did homework. And then later on, you practiced them in other areas. And eventually it got to where it was just second nature to you, but that takes time. You have to manage your expectations. You can't expect perfection. Always be looking for progress, but not perfection. And I tell people, write down the progress you're seeing, write down your wins, because sometimes we lose sight of that, especially over a long period of time. Consider what's going into your dog's bucket. Don't expect them to be able to play a game or come home and do really well at games when they've been to the vet and then you took them to the park and you got them a hamburger and they've had all these things playing into their buckets, because good things and bad things pay into the bucket. So when that bucket's full, you got to give them time to let it empty. And usually that means you have to just let them rest. So that's managing the fullness of that bucket. Consider your energy state because it really matters. And if you are really upset, then they're going to be upset, and that's not a good time to play. Use every opportunity for training. Even they come up on new things, or if they can do some boundary training, that's good. Never force it. Remember, this is supposed to be fun. And remind yourself all the time of, why did I get this dog in the first place? What is it that you have goals to do with your dog? And then work with your trainer to set those goals and to figure out the training you need to do. Okay, guys, that's it. Until I see you next time, keep playing.